Welcome to Prepared for Parenthood, the podcast for hopeful, expectant, and new parents with little ones up to age 5. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Duger, a psychotherapist, author, educator, parent coach, and married mother of 2. On this show, we'll discuss everything from the most up-to-date practicals of best supporting your young children, to thriving in relationship as a family, to more surprising topics around the psychology and development of babies from conception through age 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Welcome back to Prepared for Parenthood. I'm so happy to welcome our guest today, Sarah Parise, a wellness coach who focuses on effortless meal prep and fun workouts for busy moms who crave more energy and happiness. Sarah says her journey into motherhood was both a dream come true and a nightmare realized. Through postpartum depression, mom guilt, and anxiety, her own struggles became the driving force behind her mission to redefine the motherhood narrative and empower moms everywhere. Through Great Days by Sarah and Half Enterprises, she invites mothers to prioritize themselves for just 2% of the day, a small commitment that yields immeasurable benefits, helping moms become a better everything to everyone. So thanks for joining us today, Sarah. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited for our chat.
So, Sarah, I feel like many moms can really relate to that journey that you described just in the intro of how you became a mom, how hard it was, and joyful at the same time. I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit about that journey with us.
Absolutely. Like so many moms out there, it took us a long time to get pregnant, and we finally did. And it was going to be like the greatest journey ever. And pregnancy was fine. Childbirth, well, not so much. I was in labor for 36 hours. I broke my tailbone. And then finally, they did take her out vaginally with forceps. So I had a lot of damage. She had a lot of damage, but they needed to get her out quickly because the umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck. So she was swept away from me very quickly. She came out. She was very blue, definitely not crying. She was not breathing. And so my husband went with her to the NICU. All these doctors and nurses raced out of the room, and I was kind of left there. And I was like, what just happened? One, I thought I lost my baby. Like, no one told me she's going to be okay. No one gave me any reassuring anything. No one said anything to me. So that start of motherhood being like, oh my God, I just lost her. Like, I carried her for all these months and I just lost her. And then she was fine. She had swallowed meconium, so she wasn't breathing. The cord was wrapped around her neck. She ended up in the NICU for 5 days, but it worked out because she needed the little extra boost to kind of get her going. Also, like the Shaquille O'Neal, for those basketball fans out there, of the NICU. She was 8 pounds, and most babies in the NICU are like at least half of that. So I got a lot of questions of like, why are you here? Why is she in here? From the get-go, the amount of guilt of the doctors and nurses who are caring for her. And there's these 2-pound babies flying on both sides of her. So mom guilt hit me really quickly of like, I don't know, should she be in here? Is this necessary? Well, obviously it was. I was not in my right frame of mind at that point. But we ended up bringing her home 5 days after having her, and life didn't get much easier. She had torticollis, so she was really stretched on one side of her neck and really crunched on the other. So she came out kind of crooked. Her head looked like it was on, kind of mismatched, like she was put on by Play-Doh, not by real skin. So she had a really hard time latching, as one can imagine. So breastfeeding was incredibly challenging. I also couldn't sit. So I was breastfeeding her like on my counter and trying to tilt her in ways that her neck would allow to get her to latch and breastfeed. So it was kind of a comedy of errors, like things that you had read about and things you had prepped for. And I had all like the pillows and the support and the breast pump and like all the things, and nothing was really going smoothly. And that was kind of my journey for the first 6 months. When I went for my 6-month appointment, I was venting my frustrations to my doctor. And he's like, well, are you crying all the time? I'm like, I'm not crying at all. I'm not sad. I'm frustrated. I'm mad. Why am I 1 in a million that breaks her tailbone? Why do I have all this damage? Because we had to use forceps to get her out because she needed to come out of me very quickly. I understand that not all babies sleep, but in the mom group that I was in at the hospital, like their babies were sleeping. Their babies were latching. They were able to breastfeed. They were able to do all the things they had planned. And then there was me. So it kind of led me down this pretty dark road on very undiagnosed postpartum depression. It's definitely what I was dealing with, and probably more so on the anxiety side. And no one really talks about the potential rage of motherhood. I was 36 when I had her, so I had lived an entire adult life independently and on my own, doing what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it for like a really long time. And then I had this baby, and it felt like everything was stripped away, which sounds so selfish. And at the time, that's how I felt. I felt like I was selfish. Like I couldn't see my friends anymore. I couldn't go out anymore. I couldn't run. I couldn't do yoga. I really couldn't do anything that my body used to be able to do because I was carrying around a ton of extra weight. And I was pretty damaged from childbirth in general. And here I was like 4 or 5 months out, and it wasn't getting any easier. And it wasn't until that 6 month mark, as I had very dark thoughts of taking my own life, and like, I can't do this. I can't be the mother that I want to be for my daughter. On the cliff in Santa Monica, California, I stood leaning against a fence. And I mean, my life could have gone in one of two directions at that point. And thank God that I thought of my mom and thought maybe it was this hard for her, which I had never asked her. I'd never even thought to talk to her about being a new mom. And I took a step back from the fence I was leaning on, and then I cried. And I cried for a long time. And I sat on a bench and I just cried. Luckily, my daughter was home with my husband. And I decided that day forward, I needed a change and I needed to do something because I couldn't live like this anymore. And it wasn't fair to my daughter, my husband, and it definitely wasn't fair to myself. So I decided the next day to go to a yoga class. That was what I knew and loved. And I went in and laid on my side because I couldn't lay on my back. And I continued my mission of crying for my 3 day stint of realizing that I had held everything in and it was coming out of me all at one time. And at the end of class, I hadn't done anything. So talk about guilt. I paid for this crazy expensive yoga class, Southern California, and I didn't even do anything. I just laid there and I cried and listened to the teacher and watched all the beautiful bodies around the room do their thing. But at the end of class, the teacher came up to me, who I'd never met before. And she said, I don't know what you're going through, but the important part is that you showed up and you just need to keep showing up. And she changed my life that day. And I said the whole walk home, you need to show up. You need to start showing up. You need to show up for Natalie. You need to show up for Joe. You need to show up for yourself. And in tiny little bite-sized pieces, I started showing up again and was able to kind of dig myself out of the darkness and back into the light and realize that there's a reason I went through it. And now I'm on a journey to help others that are going through it. And you don't have to be in that dark of a place. It can just be motherhood is hard and you want a little extra help and a little extra guidance. And that's why I love your podcast. I love that you're bringing these 10 topics to attention because I don't think people talk about them enough.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. Such a hard journey, such a powerful personal journey, and also just brings to light how many people go through that, or something similar to that. I think we often have this kind of glowing imagination of what becoming a mother is going to be like. And we have the cute baby showers with the little onesies and the booties and all the fun stuff. And we're kind of tossed into this experience. For some people, it starts in pregnancy, but then there's childbirth, there's postpartum. And in this culture, at least, I don't feel like we have a lot of support surrounding us, right? So that's kind of an anomaly to have enough support already in place and to know what you need. And so speaking to the isolation of it, of like, I didn't even ask my mom, what was it like for you? She wasn't available at that point for you. Or we take it on as I should be able to do this. I should need to ask for help. And then the concerns around healthcare providers potentially missing some of the other signs. Like if you're not crying all the time, maybe depression or anxiety is showing up in a different way, right? Our lexicon, I feel like, needs to get a little larger and we need to be a little bit more aware of what's happening because you got to such a hard place and you came to a breaking point of making a big decision. And I'm so grateful for you and for your family and for all of us out here that you chose to stay with us on the planet and be there with your family. And I know that that place for so many people as a therapist, I hear is just so dark. It's so hard. It's so dark.
And people ask me all the time, like, did you have issues before? And I've never had issues with depression or anxiety or any of it before this. So not even knowing what it was, why I felt the way I felt in that dark space. And unless you experience it, it's very hard to even explain that there was no tiny bit of light that I could see to hold on to be like, you can get back there. It was like complete hopelessness. And whether you dealt with it pre having kids or dealing with it for the first time, it's just different once you become a mother and you think about the responsibilities you have. And a lot of times, incredibly overwhelming to even think about everything that needs to be done.
Yeah. And also in your story, there's the experience of pretty intense birth trauma, right? So
Mhm.
you're experiencing trauma, you're trying to navigate that as a new parent. Nobody can really relate. You can't sit down, you can't see
Mhm.
people. I mean, I'm trying to imagine the amount of pain that you were in and caring for this little one who was probably also in a lot of pain with her neck
Mhm.
not in the right position. And
Yeah.
it's just so hard. So kudos to you for finding your way through it. Amazing. And how long do you feel like it took for you to kind of get to the other side?
So at that 6-month mark, it was right after Natalie's half birthday. So it was right around that 6-month mark where I hit like the darkest of dark. And then I went to that yoga class. And then from there, I spoke to someone at the hospital and was just like, listen, I still can't sit. We're 6 months out. My doctor's telling me what I'm feeling is normal. But one of the lactation consultants led the support group at the hospital. And she said, by the sounds of it, internal physical therapy is your next step of what to do. And I was like, okay, what is that? That sounds pretty horrible. And I had never even heard of pelvic floor therapy before that. And she's like, I have someone for you. She's right down the street. I couldn't drive. I only was limited to like where I could walk to also. And so I started seeing her. And at the first time I went in, I had my daughter with me. I also didn't have childcare, which I think a lot of women run into. Like, yeah, I'd love to do all, but can I bring my child? And a lot of offices are like, no, it's just the mother. Luckily, she was in a space that I could bring her. She did an initial exam and it kind of felt like an annual a little bit, being wide open to someone that you've never met before in the situation. And she said, I had so much scar tissue that that's why it was still hurting when there was so much swelling, that my tailbone appeared to be healing the way it should. It wasn't my tailbone that was causing me the pain, it was everything else. So it was that I had these stitches, that I had all of this major tearing going on. And she's like, your scar tissue is just kind of taken over. And at this point, all truth be told, I really never thought I would have sex again. There was no part of me that felt like that was going to be an option for me anymore. So I worked with her just for 4 weeks. And it was just once a week. And she went in and broke down the scar tissue manually, which is obviously not super enjoyable. But after every single session, I felt so much better. By the end of the 4 weeks, I could sit without any kind of cushioning. I could walk. I started actually jogging again. Everything just kind of went back and fell into place. I continued to see her for 4 more weeks. So it was only 8 weeks total. And she taught me how to strengthen my pelvic floor again, which I think all of us should go through after having a baby, whether it's vaginal or cesarean section, because I've learned that your pelvic floor obviously is holding the baby this whole time. So everyone has some sort of adjustment, to say the least, not necessarily damage, but it adjusts to what you're going through. And so I worked with her for 8 weeks and then I really started to turn it around. I was able to exercise again. I was able to finally sleep comfortably because I could roll over without being in agony. And so she really physically changed my life. And at the end of the time working with her, she asked, well, what's next? What's your next goal? What are you going to do next? And I said, honestly, I've been looking for someone here that can tell me what to eat while breastfeeding, like support me with my breastfeeding health. My daughter got physical therapy, so she was finally able to latch around the 7-month mark. I want someone to tell me how to move my body, because this body I don't recognize. I have been a personal trainer for 15 plus years at that point, had a master's in exercise physiology, but this body wasn't my body. I was carrying around 35 extra pounds. I was stretchy in ways that I was never stretchy before. My hips were just very different. And I had a chest with like, how do you work out with this? How do you run with this? I want someone to tell me exactly what to do. And she's like, you can't find that person. I said, no, I can't. I just really want someone to give me like a roadmap of what to do. And she goes, so what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to create it. I'm going to do it. And she looked at me and she's like, I mean, that sounds a little crazy, but I kind of believe you. So that's what I set out to do. I set out to learn as much as I possibly can about postpartum recovery, which really can take up to 2 years for women. So you're not working with a body that was pre-baby up until probably around the 2-year mark. That's if everything goes as planned and it's pretty well. And so my first program was 3 weeks. It was just taking moms through just get started for the 3 weeks. Get started physically, address some of the mental and emotional stuff that we're going through surrounding mom guilt and all of the other things that go along with just becoming a new parent. And it has morphed through the years, and it's been 8 years now. So now it's a 12-week program that I take moms through, and not from the 6-week mark of postpartum, which is where I thought it would go, because no one's ready to start at the 6-week mark to take care of themselves because we're just trying to survive at that point. It's
So-
more later toddlers, early elementary school that we finally say, okay, it can be mom's turn now.
Sarah, you mentioned that at a certain point, physically, you felt like you'd never have sex again. And I'm curious, how were things with your husband during that experience? Because that obviously it impacted you and impacted him as well.
Luckily, I have an incredibly supportive partner, and he really just wanted me to get the help that I needed to get through that point. But we were distant. We were distant for the sex reason. We were distant for the not sleeping reason. We were distant because I was so angry that he got to go to work. I was a stay-at-home mom at that point, and there was so much jealousy that he got to go to work some days. It would have been so much easier to go to work and to deal with this child that won't eat, this child that won't sleep, the house, meal, all of it that goes into being a stay-at-home mom. But luckily, the first time we tried, it was hilarious. I kind of joke with him sometimes that I wish that was on camera. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is how it's going to feel. And luckily, happy to report that my sex life is even better than it was before with a healthy pelvic floor after having 2 kids. But it puts a strain on things for sure, because I didn't even want to be anywhere near intimate because I was just feeling so much like not myself.
Yeah. And in a lot of pain and caring for someone and probably feeling touched out and not even being able to sit down. I mean, you must have been so exhausted. New parenthood, I feel like, is so exhausting for any person who just birthed a baby, but especially if you couldn't even sit down.
After you read of all these things, of I wasn't going to have any medication during birth, and I wanted to remember everything, I wanted to do all these things. And afterwards, you're like, that wasn't anything like I read about. That didn't go at all as planned. I pictured getting to the hospital and being in my birth space and bouncing on my birth ball and walking around and doing all these things that I had read about. I did none of those. I tested positive for strep B. So as soon as I got to the hospital, I was tied to an IV on a bed. And I was like, none of this went the way that it was supposed to go. So I kind of felt cheated. The crazy thing is I had another kid after that.
Well, that's often the road that we take, right?
Yeah.
So how did you work through the emotional pieces of not having the birth that you hoped for, not having the postpartum that you hoped for?
A lot of therapy. A lot of therapy of just talking through things. In my mind, it was, what could I have done different in pregnancy or leading up to it? Should I have sought better support? I thought I was lined up at the hospital at UCLA and went to the new mom support group. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. That's what the childbirth class told me to do. Find your community, build your village. So I was doing this, but it seemed like it was working for everyone else. And it felt like I was broken. In hindsight, I should have found a different group, or I should have found different support at the time. So as a little preventative, when I found out I was pregnant with my second one, I joined a study at Johns Hopkins University, and they followed me all through pregnancy. And it was basically studying the hormone changes and the mental health pre-pregnancy, into pregnancy, and then afterward. So I had someone following up with me. I wish I had those supports in place before my first one, but you don't know what you don't know. I wish someone had also given me a little permission to say yes to the help that people were offering me. We didn't have family nearby, but we certainly had friends that were willing to do things. And I grew up with a mom who did everything. You never got meals from people. I don't remember her ever calling in the reinforcement so she could have a break. And I think I learned the hard way. I eventually just accepted that the birth process happened the way it happened. And I had to focus on that she was healthy. She's a thriving, now almost 8-year-old. And I have to focus on that. After therapy, she's like, well, you can't go back and change it. And even if you have another one, it's not going to be exactly the same. Each birth story is different, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be the beautiful thing that you read about, that you wanted it to be in your head. So I lowered my expectations big time. And
And
then I had
how was your birth second time through?
the most fast and furious childbirth ever. We
Oh,
barely made it to the hospital because I was telling my husband, I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to be there for 2 days before I have her. I want to labor at home and then I'll go in and then I'll do all the things they need me to do. And my water broke on the way to the hospital. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it. This is going to be a side of the road baby over here. So we got there and we went to check in and she's like, okay, we'll be with you in a minute. Have a seat. I was like, there's no having a seat. I think I'm having this baby right now. Very shortly after that, she came.
so I'm glad that you made it, at least that she wasn't on the side of the road, which might have been a little scary for you,
I think
unexpected.
so. But I'll be honest, I think I would have accepted it compared to what I had been through the first.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see how you really wouldn't want to return to a hospital experience after the
Mhm,
first time. Sometimes when a baby comes quickly, it can be a little hard on our bodies. Would you say that
mhm.
experience was easier in terms of recovery afterwards? You
Everything
know,
would be there. I think it's all relative. Like I went through such trauma the first time that the second time she was born, she latched on right away. She was breastfeeding. I just sat there crying. I'm like, oh, this is what people are talking about. This is amazing. Like she came out, she was crying. I knew she was breathing. She got to be on me right away. And I got to have kind of that dream birth story that you read about, which wasn't the case the first time.
well, I'm glad that you got the reparative experience. And
Me
the
too.
great thing I always want to remind people is that these pieces, both for mamas and babies, for the whole family system, can be repaired. So even though you had a hard first birth and a very fast second birth, and your baby had a very hard first birth, all of that can be worked through with professionals who are skilled in those areas. So it's a beautiful thing at any point in time. I've talked with people who repair that in their 20s when the child's in their 20s. And they're
Mhm.
like, oh, it was a hard birth experience. I don't imagine it impacted me much. And I'm like, no, it might have. And so just unpacking that, I think, is great and healing that. And so I'm so glad that you got to have a more gentle birth experience, quick, but gentler and more to your liking, I guess.
I mean, I think everyone should go to therapy after giving birth because I think no matter what it goes like, there's a lot to unpack and a lot that goes on that you don't expect, especially the first time, where there's just a lot of things that happen in that room that you're like, whoa, I didn't know this was going to be the case, or that things don't always go perfectly as planned. Actually, most times, I think they don't go perfectly planned when it comes to a birth plan.
Yeah. And I think, again, back to this culture that we live in this country, most of us are not exposed to being at a birth, like ever seeing a birth before we're in it ourselves, right? It's not like we're
Absolutely.
in a village and everyone goes into the woman's space and helps her.
Hmm.
And it's just not like that. It's very isolated, I feel like. And so
Hmm.
that we hear stories, and a lot of them are scary stories, which
Hmm.
makes us go into birth probably nervous often or anticipating that something bad might happen. And other times we go in thinking it's going to go exactly like I want it to go. And the baby has his or her own journey onto the planet as well. So we don't
Hmm.
control all of those pieces. It's a tandem experience.
And that's such a good point too. Like it's just as much affecting on her as it was on me and me and on her.
So, other than inviting people to seek out support afterwards, what might you offer up as advice to a mom who's about to go in and have her first baby?
Oh, you gotta not forget about yourself. I know every baby book talked about like how to care for the baby when you get home. And some books talk about the postnatal care journey, depending on how you deliver. But I think the mental aspect of being able to, if you do have a partner in all of this, really talking openly about when do I get time to take care of myself. And it doesn't need to be a fancy spa day or manicures, pedicures, and all those things that I think people think about when we talk about self care. It can be, can I go for a walk by myself? Can I take a bath? Can I take an extended shower? Can I just sit and read? And it doesn't need to be long periods of time. But I really wish from the beginning someone told me just take a tiny time out for yourself every day from the beginning. So you get used to it. So your baby gets used to it. So your partner gets used to it. And then if you don't have a partner in all of this, reach out to your community. So be around other people that are going through this and then start to swap. I have a neighbor who's watching my little one right now. We do the switch all the time. There's no money. There doesn't cost us anything. It is just time. We did it since we moved here. You do need a break and you deserve a break. And that's not just because you're a stay-at-home mom. It doesn't matter if you work outside the home. Plan on something each day, even if it's small, for yourself. Because it's amazing what a 10-minute shower with not listening to a screaming baby can do for your mental state after you have one.
Yeah, I love that advice. And I think it's so critical, especially in a culture where we're expected to do everything on our own. And it's kind of a badge of honor. Oh, well, I did it on my own. But actually, it's really important to be interdependent instead of just independent, right?
Absolutely.
And it shows up so clearly when you have this little being with you all the time. We are interdependent and we need breaks from that for ourselves. So we need that support of the community. So I'm glad that you're getting that.
And there's plenty of programs too, like the YMCA is great. They have childcare from 6 weeks on. So that you can go and you can just enjoy a cup of coffee in the lobby. You don't even have to work out. Obviously, I'm a proponent of moving your body while you take that time. But if you just need that break, it's a very reasonable monthly fee. And we've had awesome luck everywhere we've lived with YMCA.
So you came up with this percentage of 2% of self-care time for moms per day. Can you talk a little bit about what the 2% is and why it's so critical?
Oh, absolutely. It's like my favorite thing because 1% really isn't enough, right? We deserve more than 1%. 2% is a little less than 30 minutes a day. So I want to make it doable. And it doesn't need to be all at once. It can be split up. So maybe you take 5 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the middle of the day, and then 10 minutes at the end of the day. But it just taking that time as a timeout for yourself can do so much, not only for your physical health, if you're choosing to move your body during that time, but the mental and emotional health of being a mom. We have so much mentally on our plate all the time. To have that mental capacity to kind of step back and do a little something for yourself. And it could be just reading 3 pages. If you like to read and you can't sit down and read a chapter, don't not do it because you can't read a chapter. Do it anyways and just do less. So kind of dropping that all or nothing, I think makes a huge difference when you think about your self-care journey, especially as a busy mom, because you have your hands in so many different things, literally all of the time. And just being able to take that little time out for yourself, I think these tiny bite-sized things can make a drastic difference throughout the week.
And so your focus is primarily on effortless food prep and fun workouts. Can you share some of your favorite easy meals that moms can whip together and maybe a couple of favorite workouts?
So my favorite one this week, I call it Georgia Peach Chicken, kind of a knockoff of one of the restaurants that I used to work at. You just take a sweet salsa. So like peach salsa, pineapple salsa, just some kind of fruity salsa. So it's not too spicy, especially if you're feeding little ones. And dump half the jar into a pie dish. Put some chicken in, dump the rest of it on top, and bake it for 30 minutes. It's the easiest protein and it's delicious. It reheats really well. And then I usually just do a bag of steamed broccoli in the microwave. So just 4 minutes in the microwave and you have a beautiful little fresh and spicy dinner. You could make it spicy, but I like to make it with the peach for my kids so that they eat it. That's like my favorite one. We're gluten-free, so you could add whatever grains you'd like to add to it. We can sometimes serve it over brown rice, but that's a super easy one that I love. And then my fallback, we always have stuff in the house for quesadillas, always, because it's the one things my kids will eat. But I love that you can load them up with veggies and protein, and it doesn't need to be this cheesy kind of mess. So I do gluten-free spinach wrap, and then a little bit of cheese, a little bit of chicken, and then a ton of vegetables. Once again, that leftover broccoli is a great thing to throw in it. Peppers, onions. If you're not eating chicken, tofu works great too. If you just saute it up first before putting it in, so it has a little bit of crunch, and it's an easy 10-minute meal. So my kids always know if they don't love what we're eating for dinner, which happens in families at times, or they're not eating the food that we are eating because it's touching something else that they don't want it to touch, we always know that there's a backup of some sort of veggie quesadilla.
Nice.
And then for the workouts, I have an awesome free tool that I'll drop the link in for you. And it's how busy moms prioritize their own wellness. And it comes in the form of a bingo board. And this one sits on my refrigerator. If you picture a bingo board with all of the squares, you have your free space in the middle, and your goal is to get at least one bingo a day. So there's little things you can do while you prep lunches. You do 20 squats. When you're doing dinner, there's counter push-ups. It's all these things that you don't have to change out of your clothes. Not a long thing, but every little thing really adds up.
I love the idea of working things in throughout. I think often we get locked into, okay, I need to go run or go for a walk or a hike or whatever for X number of minutes in a row. And if I don't do that, then I don't have time. But if you break it up throughout the day, you're still getting the benefits. That makes it so much easier for people who are busy, moms or otherwise.
And you might do more if you break it up throughout the course of the day. Maybe if you don't save it until after the kids go to bed, and you might make it through that 15-minute workout. But if you piece it together throughout the course of the day, maybe you need 20 minutes of movement that's benefiting your body. And of course, your mind also, which is why I love exercise.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Sarah. It's been so fun
Of course.
talk with you, and so appreciate you sharing your journey and how you came through to the other side. Can you share, please, for people how they can reach out and find out more about you and your programs and what you do?
Absolutely. You can find me online. My website is Great Days by Sarah with an H at the end of Sarah. And then on Facebook, we have a great community called Time Out for Moms, Wellness, Accountability, and Support. And that one is exactly how it sounds. Little tips and tricks that you can squeeze in throughout the course of the week to make yourself a little healthier as well as your family. And then on Instagram, my handle's Great Days by Sarah. And I post fun workouts and recipes and just, again, little bite-sized things. I've just started a series called Wellness Whispers that I got a lot of feedback on the last couple of weeks. And it's just little things that don't take up a lot of time. You don't have to be alone. And it's just stepping in the right direction to make that next healthy choice.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Prepared for Parenthood podcast today. I hope you found this episode educational, informational, and conversational, and that you'll join me again for another episode soon. If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, I'd very much appreciate if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you're interested in more information related to today's podcast, or are looking for parent coaching or courses, you can find my information in the show notes or online at preparedforparenthood.com.